Up next, I'm going to count down my top 10 favorite CCM vocal groups. These are groups whose music I've owned over the years, coming up on Andrew's journey in Christian contemporary music. Welcome to Andrew's journey in Christian contemporary music, where we dive into the classics, discover what's new, and demonstrate the originals. If you're into all things Christian contemporary music, hit that subscribe button. And don't forget, if you like today's video, to give it a thumbs up. It's really important. Climb aboard. Let's do the Christian contemporary music journey together. Before I get started, I just want to mention that I have created a Spotify playlist called Dive into the Classics. In it are songs and or albums that I've mentioned in previous Dive into the Classic episodes, and will also include songs from the vocal groups that are going to be in this episode. I will also be creating a Discover What's New playlist for those episodes, and a playlist of my previously recorded and released originals. The link to the Dive into the Classics playlist is down in the description below. So before I begin my top 10, I want to give an honorable mention to a vocal group who would definitely be on this list, if I owned anything from them, which I didn't, shame on me, and that's the second chapter of Acts. Even though there were many gospel vocal groups that preceded them, the siblings Annie Herring, Nellie Greason, and Matthew Ward blazed a trail during the 70s Jesus music movement. So a big shout out to the second chapter of Acts. Okay, here we go. My top 10 CCM vocal groups. Now remember, these are my top 10 as they are all groups whose music I have owned over the years. Coming in at number 10, Silverwind. Formed in Tacoma, Washington, studio releases were the self-titled album in 1980, A Song in the Night in 1982, By His Spirit in 1985, and Set Apart in 1986. We owned all four on cassette. Christian music's answer to ABBA. If you like more ABBA sound, go for the earlier albums. The first three albums featured trio, male Georgian Banoff, and females Betsy Hernandez and Patty Gramling. The last album, Set Apart, featured a totally different trio of Rick Starrett, Patsy Hilton Klein, and Laurel Peters that was a bit of a departure from the ABBA sound. My personal favorite is the third album, By His Spirit. The ABBA-sounding version of Silverwind got a little bit more updated on this release, more, current sound of the day compared to the first two albums. I love the bass playing on this album by Leon Gare. If you want to check out a song, listen to Heaven is Being With You. It's always been one of my faves from Silverwind. Coming in at number 9, TakeSix. Formed in Alabama in 1980 as an Acapella sextet, we only owned the self-titled debut from 1988. TakeSix would be much higher up this list if we had owned more of their albums. They have 14 studio and 1 live album to their credit that span from 1988 through to 2018. In those 30 years of recordings, they have only changed personnel twice. Mervyn Warren gave way to Joey Kibble in 1991 and Cedric Dent to Christian Dentley in 2011. Otherwise, Claude V. McKnight III, Mark Kibble, David Thomas, and Alvin Chia have been in the group since the debut album. Their inspirational gospel, jazz, R&B a cappella style has garnered them several Grammy and Dove Awards. If you like a cappella and don't know TakeSix, you need to know them. And if you aren't into a cappella, check them out anyway. Coming in at number 8, Phillips, Craig and Dean. The pastors turned inspirational vocal trio, Phillips, Craig and Dean have sold over 2 million albums. Not bad for a couple of pastors, eh? Though their earlier work garnered them a fair bit of success, it was when they started recording and releasing worship music that really catapulted their career. They hit the pinnacle with the 2009 release Fearless, which featured the incredibly successful single Jenny Lee Riddle's Revelation song. It captured Dove Awards for Worship Song of the Year and Inspirational Album of the Year for Fearless. Oddly enough, I don't own that album. Before the worship album era, we purchased their second release, Lifeline, which was released in 1994, which unfortunately we no longer have, and their 1996 Christmas album, Repeat the Sounding Joy, which we still play every holiday season. The worship albums that we own are Let My Words Be Few from 2001, Let the Worshipers Arise from 2004, and Top of My Lungs from 2006. Though over the years Dan Dean takes the lead on a good chunk of the songs, Randy Phillips and Sean Craig are no slouches either. Highlights for me from the album Lifeline are the country-esque A Friend Called Grace and the beautiful Dan Dean ballad He'll Do Whatever It Takes. From the worship albums, check out Pour My Love on You, a Dan Dean co-write from the Let My Words Be Few album, and the Sean Craig co-write Your Love Still Amazes Me from the same album. Perhaps my favorite worship song that they didn't write is You Are God Alone, written by Billy and Cindy Foote, recorded on the Let the Worshipers Arise album. Coming in at number 7, Point of Grace. Started out as an all-female quartet in 1991 from Arkansas, they trimmed down to a trio in mid-2008. Original members were Shelley Breen, Denise Jones, Terry Jones, and Heather Payne. The current trio consists of Shelley, Denise, and Lee Capolino. They released their debut album in 1993, won the Dove Award for New Artist of the Year, then went on to much success for the next 15 plus years, capturing 10 more Dove Awards. We owned their second and third albums, which unfortunately we no longer have. We never owned the debut, but if you want to check out the albums with the bulk of their hits, listen to the debut and the second album, The Whole Truth. Between the two albums, they had 11 number one hits. 11 number one hits. We played our CD of The Whole Truth a lot. The deep cut, Take Me Back, was always among my favorites. A little more of a gospel, funk, jazzy feel with an awesome lead vocal and Tommy Sims laying down the keyboards, synth bass, drums, and percussion programming. You can't go wrong with a song Tommy Sims is a part of. Coming in at number 6, Anointed. Formed in Columbus, Ohio, Anointed started as a quartet, then became a trio, and then down to a duo. The existing members are siblings Steve Crawford and Daedric Crawford Greathouse. Former members were Nisi Walls Allen and Mary Tiller Woods. They released 6 albums and 1 compilation album. We owned their 2 most successful albums. Their second album, The Call, from 1995. They were still a quartet at that point, and the album won them 3 Dove Awards and became one of the best-selling CCM albums of the 1990s. Their follow-up, Under the Influence, from 1996, won them another Dove for the title track. It won them the Urban Song of the Year and had a very popular video as well. They were a trio for the Under the Influence album. R&B, soul, funk, pop infusions with their voices are just dynamite. If you've never heard Anointed, go listen to The Call. It was a big success with good reason. Gotta love the song Gotta Love It, which features some killer guitar work from legend Dan Huff. Or check out the deep track If I Labor and see why I love the voice of Steve Crawford. And yes, that is Michael W. Smith providing some guest vocals on that track. Coming in at number 5, Avalon. Avalon was the brainchild of Norman Miller from Nashville. After nearly putting his idea of a 2-male, 2-female quartet to rest, Sparrow A&R director Grant Cunningham found Michael Passons, who would become the first member of the group. In comes Jana Potter, now Jana Long, Rick Kittleman, and Tabitha Fair, and Avalon was born. That was 1995. The group went through a number of personnel changes over the years, the most significant being Michael Passons giving way to former solo artist Greg Long in 2003, who married Jana, and Rick Kittleman's time with Avalon, very brief, and was replaced by Jody McBrayer, who is currently on his second stint with the group after stepping away in 2007 due to illness. Avalon's two biggest selling albums were their second release, A Maze of Grace, and their third release, In a Different Light, both albums certified gold and produced a number of number one hits, including perhaps their biggest, Testify to Love. We never owned A Maze of Grace, but owned the debut. There's the debut. In a Different Light, third album. Oxygen. And Stand. The only one we own with Greg Long on it. And their Christmas album, which I love, Joy, a Christmas collection. For recommendations, don't look past the debut album. It had 3 number one hits of its own and some really good deep cuts like Here to Deliver, Let It Be Forever, Jesus is Lord, and a beautiful rendition of the hymn, My Jesus, I Love Thee. Coming in at number 4, BB and CC Winans. What do you get when you pluck 2 siblings out of a musical family of 10 kids and have them come together as a vocal duo? In the case of the Winans family, you get magic. After a stint with the old PTL Club TV show, BB and CC Winans branched out with their self-titled debut album under the Sparrow label in 1987. My wife and I received a wedding gift in 1989. It was a cassette of BB and CC's 1988 second release, Heaven. This was our introduction to the dynamic sibling duo. 5 singles hit the U.S. Christian charts from the album, with the single Lost Without You going to number 1. Not to be outdone, their 1991 third release, Different Lifestyles, became bigger still, reaching number 1 on the U.S. Gospel and U.S. R&B charts, number 8 on the Christian Adult Contemporary chart, and produced 2 number 1 singles, Addictive Love and I'll Take You There, the old Staple Singers classic, featuring Mavis Staples herself. We own Different Lifestyles along with Heaven, and also own the 1993 Christmas album entitled First Christmas. They would release one more album in 1994 called Relationships before launching into their respective solo careers. They would reunite in 2009 to do the album Still, which went to number 1 on the U.S. Gospel chart. They had successful solo careers, especially CeCe, but I've always loved the stuff they put out as a duo. My recommendations from Heaven, try You or Trust Him, or even their brilliant rendition of Bridge Over Troubled Water. From Different Lifestyles, try the songs It's Okay, which really highlights how well they perform together, or The Blood, which features some old school rapping from guest MC Hammer. And now we're down to the top 3. Coming in at number 3, Acapella. Having reached its 40th anniversary this year, Acapella has had over 40 members that make up this male acapella quartet. Started by Keith Lancaster in 1982, he served as first tenor, then second tenor, before stepping down in 1987 to focus on producing for the group. Oddly enough, when Keith stepped aside and tenors George Pendergrass and Gary Moyers, plus baritone Wayburn Dean, came into the group to join bass Rodney Britt, Acapella released their landmark album Sweet Fellowship in 1988. Rodney Britt gave way to bass Dwayne Adams, and this quartet released 3 albums following Sweet Fellowship: Rescue in 1990, We Have Seen His Glory in 1991, and Set Me Free in 1993. This was the pinnacle of Acapella's success. We owned Sweet Fellowship, Rescue, and We Have Seen His Glory, all amazing albums that I would recommend you check out. My personal favorite vocalist in the group was George Pendergrass. From Sweet Fellowship, check out Criminal on the Cross or View That Holy City. From the album Rescue, check out Who Is Gonna Tell the Child. And from the album We Have Seen His Glory, check out Sing to the Glory. Coming in at number 2. If there was one vocal group that was my wife and I's soundtrack for the first 10 years of our marriage, it was For Him. We were married in 1989. For Him came out with their self-titled debut in 1990, and we got into them right from the start. Former members of the band Truth, Andy Chrisman, Mark Harris, Kirk Sullivan, and Marty McGahee came together and released 8 original studio releases, a Christmas album, hymns album, and several compilation releases. Their voices were all so distinct that I could never see any of them be replaced if one were to leave the group, and they must have felt the same way, as they remained the only 4 members. Whether any one of them took the lead on a song, or 2 co-led a song, or all 4 would take turns leading in a song, their sound was distinctive and unique. For Him's formula worked with 27 number 1 singles, Dove Awards, and gold albums. They started off with a bang, as their first single, Where There Is Faith, went to number 1 for 8 weeks. Their sound would evolve over the years in an attempt to stay current musically. We owned their first 7 releases, which includes their Christmas album, The Season of Love. We also have their 2006 release, Encore, for future generations, a mix of older and new songs. For me, they reached their peak with the 1996 release, The Message. Songs to recommend here, just a few. Stay Forever from the debut, Over the Horizon from their second album, Face the Nation, Love Finds You from their 4th release, The Ride, Lay It on the Line, and Land of Mercy from The Message. For Him at number 2. And finally, we get to number 1, First Call. My wife introduced me to First Call. I'll never forget it. The front of the cassette that she had featured 3 individuals wearing very bright colors, red, yellow, and blue. As she pressed play on the cassette player, the first song came on with cool, jazzy harmonies as each member of the group took turns on lead vocals. Catchy, head bopping, and downright cool. Little would I know what would come next. The tongue-twisting title track, Something Takes Over, often compared with the group The Manhattan Transfer. After 2 songs I heard, I was absolutely hooked. Marty McCall, Bonnie Keane, and Mel Tunney came from different backgrounds, came together as backup singers for other vocalists. As their friendship grew, they decided to do a Christmas album called An Evening in December in 1985 as a side project. But lo and behold, the album became very successful, and in 1986 released their first official album, Undivided. Something Takes Over was released the following year, and then in 1989 released God Is Good. During this time, they won back-to-back Dove Awards in 1988 and 1989 for Group of the Year. Mel Tunney left the group in 1990 and was replaced by Maribeth Jordan. In 1992, they released Human Song, which had more of a mainstream feel to it. Not sure if that was intentional or not. They even did a cover of Stevie Wonder's Don't You Worry About a Thing. If it seemed intentional for Human Song to be more mainstream, then it seemed equally intentional that 1993's Sacred Journey went back into the opposite direction as a very spiritual album. We owned all 5 of the albums, Undivided through to Sacred Journey, and loved them all. Unfortunately, as their success seemed to be reaching its peak, it was revealed that Mary Beth Jordan had an extramarital relationship with CCM artist Michael English. This brought First Call to a screeching halt. Jordan left, leaving Keane and McCall wondering whether to carry on. They decided to carry on as a duo for a couple of albums. Later on, they would reunite with Mel Tunney to do a couple of projects. But during those glory years between 1986 and 1993, First Call would put out some incredible music, which I continue to enjoy to this day. Recommendations include Messiah and Step of Faith from the Undivided album, the title track, and Osinfunu Mongu, or All Creatures of Our God and King from Something Takes Over, Sweet Love and Parable of the River from God is Good, and the title track and Don't You Worry About a Thing from Human Song, and lastly, Freedom and the title track from the album Sacred Journey. And that's it. I'd love to hear your comments. Who are your favorite vocal groups in CCM? Are any of them ones that were on this list? Are they totally different? Let me know. I want to hear from you. Anyways, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. God bless. Take care. We'll see you again.